Oh, it's looking good. Coffee's flowing. It's time to get going.
Hey, welcome back to Questions Over Coffee. My name's Kevin Smith. It's good to see you again. Want a cup of coffee? Don't forget to like and subscribe so that you don't miss anything that's coming up on Questions Over Coffee. If you have a comment or a question, leave in the section below. We'll get to it just as fast as we can. Today's question comes from Diana Schmid. Diana wants to know, what does it mean in 1 Peter 3, 19 and 20, when he says that he, Jesus, went and made proclamation to the souls that were now in prison? Diana, I will tell you this is a very tough passage, but let's take a look and see if we can at least come up with some possibilities here. As we begin, let's go ahead and read 1 Peter 3, but let's read verses 18 through the end of the chapter. Let's read together. For Christ also died for sins once for all, the just for the unjust, so that he might bring us to God, having been put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the spirit, in which also he went and made proclamation to the spirits now in prison, who once were disobedient, when the patience of God kept waiting in the days of Noah, during the construction of the ark, in which a few, that is 8 persons, were brought safely through the water. Corresponding to that, baptism now saves you, not the removal of dirt from the flesh, but an appeal to God for a good conscience, through the resurrection of Jesus Christ, who is at the right hand of God, having gone into heaven after angels and authorities and powers have been subjected to him. Okay, first thing I will tell you is the Greek is absolutely no help here. I went ahead and translated these passages thinking maybe, just maybe, there's something that is hidden in there that maybe needs to be translated differently into the English, but unfortunately, no. When Peter uses the word prison here, it is the word phulake, which is actually a guarding place, a prison. So is he talking about a legitimate prison like, say, a state penitentiary or a spiritual prison? More than likely in this case, it is a spiritual prison. It makes sense. But at the same time, we can think of something like a state penitentiary just on a spiritual type level, a spiritual type guarding where prisoners are held. This has led some to believe that the thing that Peter is referring to is hell itself. And that is certainly a possibility. Where Jesus died, he was in the tomb for 3 days. He went to hell and preached to those that were in hell. This is the argument that some make. And the answer is, maybe. My question there is, what difference would that make, though? Because once they are in the place of torment, they're stuck. Although you could argue, and you'd be right, that God could change that status. And this was certainly before the time of the death on the cross. In fact, before the old covenant altogether was put into place. So you could make that argument as well. George DeHoff made this statement about this passage. It was the same Spirit that raised Christ from the dead that was the Spirit which enabled Noah in the long ago to preach to disobedient people and warn them of the coming flood. And that is certainly a possibility as well. We do know that in the Old Testament, God's Spirit rested on certain people, kings, prophets, priests sometimes, people that God had specific jobs for them to do. In Exodus, there is a passage where Aholiab and another gentleman, the name escapes me at the moment, are given the Spirit of the Lord as they are constructing the things for the tabernacle, things like that. So we know that Noah was standing for God in the days preceding the flood. So it is a possibility that God's Spirit was resting on Noah as he was proclaiming to the people. But, we don't really have that much information about what is going on here. One of the things that gives clout to DeHoff's interpretation of this passage is that he continues on to draw a parallel between Noah and flood and baptism of believers, where the ark was used to save Noah and his family. Baptism is used to save the believers today. So, that is certainly a good possibility there as well. And the last option we'll mention today is that we don't have the necessary cultural references that maybe they would have had in the first century to pull the information to fully understand it. It's like an American saying, well, I hit a home run when I gave that presentation. Americans understand what that means. Someone in a foreign country that does not play baseball may not, unless they've had an American teacher that has explained it to them. So it's the same type of situation here, where perhaps they had an understanding of something cultural, where Peter uses that understanding to make this statement and make the parallel that you and I may not have today. Diana, I know that kind of muddies the waters a little bit, but that's all of the information that I have been able to find so far on your question. This is actually a question I've had for a number of years as well, and to me, I would say either the DeHoff interpretation of the Spirit of God resting on Noah, or the we just don't have enough information interpretation tend to hold more weight than the Jesus went to hell and preached to those that were in bondage for eternity. But truthfully, we don't have enough information to make a good interpretation of what that means. We do know that based on the passage that Jesus died for us, the innocent for the guilty, and that because of his death, our baptisms allow us to have a clear conscience toward God, and that right there is just amazing. So I have a question for you. What other interpretations have you heard about this passage where Jesus proclaims the message to the souls in prison? Which interpretation do you like best here? Why? Leave me a comment section below. I'm really curious about this. Don't forget to like and subscribe so that you don't miss anything that's coming up on Questions Over Coffee. Thank you for our time together today. I look forward to the next time. Keep pressing forward.